This is the Chron Technologies Chronos 2.1 HD. It shoots 1000 frames a second at 1080p in Cinema DNG. There are some things I absolutely love about it. There's some things I don't quite love about it. I wanted to run through my thoughts and the overview of this camera for anyone considering adding this camera to their arsenal or potentially using some high-speed cinematography as part of the project that they're working on. I've shot multiple client projects with this camera now, and I wanted to share my experiences so that you can decide whether this camera is still relevant, whether it's going to fit into a project that you're looking at. You're looking to get into super slow motion and high-speed video, and whether I'd buy it again if I had my time again. This isn't a down and dirty technical review. I'm not smart enough for that. This is really to help other cinematographers and shooters out there who are looking at high-speed video for their projects, and I'll run through some of the aspects that are most important to me when I'm thinking about using a system like this. So if you're new here, my name is Nick. I'm an Australian-based video producer. In 2021, I was having a great year. My goal as a rapidly aging solo videographer was to niche into product cinematography. I had a goal that if I had won a particular project that I was pitching on at the time, I'd spend that profit on a high-speed camera, which turned out to be the Chronos 2.1 HD. I'd rented the Chronos for a couple of projects previously because I was looking really for a lower end version of a Phantom camera. For those jobs, there was a good opportunity to create some fun slow motion sequences, and I really wanted to raise the bar on the level I was capturing, the kind of production value I was offering, and have a few sequences that another videographer couldn't easily create on their own. At that stage, there were only really a couple of options for renting lower end, professional, high-speed cameras, even close to capable of producing an adequate result, in my opinion, and that was namely the FreeFly Wave and this, the Chron Technologies Chronos 2.1 HD. I rented the Chronos, honestly, because I found one relatively close to me. It cost $300 Australian a day to rent, versus over $500 for a FreeFly Wave. And to put that into context, you know, the more professional standard options that we all know and love, something like a Phantom Flex 4K, which can shoot 1000 frames at 4K, it costs upwards still of $3,500 per day, Australian. That's a huge saving between the two. And of course, there are going to be some downsides to using a lower end budget high-speed camera like this, and we'll cover those shortly. The projects I got or shot themselves as I rented this camera turned out pretty well. The images were okay, considering I'd never used a camera like this before. It was a blast shooting things exceptionally slow. So I kept an eye on it. I was lucky enough to win that project, and with that profit made the decision to purchase before the exchange rate became too crazy. That was about 18 months ago. I've used it since on, I would say, close to a dozen client projects. I know it doesn't sound like many because it is a specialty camera. So let's get into what you need to know about this particular camera. So if you have an interest in product cinematography, and perhaps that's a niche you're going into now and you're finally learning the art of better product cinematography, go ahead and subscribe. I want to share my journey, the things I'm learning, the experiments that I go through with some of the projects I'm working on, and I'm going to share that with you as much as I can. So subscribe so you don't miss any of that in the future. So these come in a few different flavors. The first thing to consider is whether you want color or monochrome, because there are two different versions, and also the internal buffer. So high-speed cameras usually work from a buffering system. This one has 8GB, 16GB, and 32GB as a kind of choosable buffer. So I purchased the 32GB buffer, and it's constantly kind of dumping footage on a loop of 11 seconds. What I like is you can trigger record to stop filming, to start filming. You can kind of do bursts to get that very specific moment. And with my experience so far in capturing high speed, I don't really feel like you need that massive buffer size. A 3-second shot at 1,000 frames a second plays, I think, close to 2 minutes in real time. I don't have the need for the 32 gig buffer. I absolutely, if I had my time again, would go for a 16 gig buffer. And to be honest, even the 8 gig buffer probably would have even been a safe bet and get what I need in 2.7 seconds at 1,000 frames a second. Okay, so let's run into the overview of the camera body itself, starting probably with the most important feature, the lens mount. This starts off at a C mount, kind of an old screw-on kind of lens mount. It's passive only, no electronics, so manual glass is key here. I only have electronic lenses, you know, kind of borrowed from the stills side of things. So for client projects, I'm either renting cinema glass, or I have a few lenses with varying maximum apertures, so I can kind of almost interchange them with similar focal ranges, you know, f1.2, f2.8, f4, that kind of thing. The sensor itself is a 4/3 sensor. That's really a 2 times crop when compared to full frame. It has a global shutter, which is great. I mean, they need to be very fast sensors at these speeds of, you know, 1,000 frames a second. So global shutter means no rolling shutter. You basically choose when you're purchasing the camera to go C mount to EF or Nikon. And the great thing is that Chrono Technologies have introduced an MFT accessory, and that allows you to kind of convert that into a hard mounted MFT mount, which then you can convert further onto other glass options like Canon using focal reducers and speed boosters. And that's great because it means you do get an extra stop of light, which essentially means you need half the light you needed before, right? And that's going to become very, very important when you're considering high speed. Inputs and outputs are pretty basic. You have a USB output, which is really, it can be for data saving. You've got eSATA for data saving, HDMI for monitoring. It does have a mic input and headphone jack. Why you'd need them, I don't know. It has a BNC input, but that's really for triggering. It's not able to send a 3G or 12G signal or anything like that. You've got an Ethernet port for networking, and you've got a AC input or DC input, depending on how you're using it. Okay, the battery, you do get one with the camera. It's a very odd shape or odd style of battery. I'd never used them before. It's an EL4A style battery. Very hard to find in Australia, especially at a decent price. So I only kept the one battery that was supplied, and I've since converted V-mount plate into being able to send power to this camera, and we'll get onto that shortly. On the battery themselves, you're probably gonna get around about 45 minutes, maybe an hour if you're lucky, on one battery. It's not the worst, but I opted for a power solution which could convert my 14.4 volt V-mount batteries into the required, you know, range of DC power to actually go right into the DC mains input. So a 120 watt hour battery is generally lasting me between 2 to 3 hours with accessories such as monitoring, sometimes wireless video, and that's at continuous power, and that suits me for any situation I've been really shooting in. So the camera has a touchscreen on the back. It's 1000 nits of brightness, which is pretty decent. It is reflective. It's a touchscreen, so I find, and it's, you know, kind of a glass touchscreen. So when you're outside, it does tend to get fairly reflective. It has focus peaking. It has zebras for overexposure. You can't pick which kind of IRE they start to kick in at. The way I read it is, if you see your zebras, that is literally overexposed. And it also has punch-in for focus assist. But really, making this camera kind of shoot ready, you have to use an external monitor. via the HDMI port. It's hard to trust this touch screen. In my eye, because there's no other additional tools that you can toggle, even a basic histogram or a exposure control like that, there's nothing really that helps there. It is possible to make this into a more traditional run and gun rig, and it's rare, but on the chances I've had to film people or activities or action, obviously this is very well placed to film things like sport and kind of high octane action. You can turn this into a run and gun rig. You don't need to be plugged into a computer. You don't need to be networked in to control it. And that's one of the advantages of something like the Chronos. You can pick it up as is, put a lens on it, go out and film something, and you don't even need to plug in your memory until it's time to save, because it's recording onto the RAM internally. So let's talk about the kind of sensitivity to the sensor. The camera has an effective ISO range of 500 to 8000. And the way you access that is as a combination of what they call the analog gain, which I guess you can kind of think of as the native ISOs, and then modifying that with a digital gain, and it's measured in decibels. But there is very noticeable what I define as fixed pattern noise if you push that gain too much, and that might just be 2 to 3 or 4 stops of gain might be too much. That was one of the first major stumbling blocks I hit when trying to get what I would define as a professional image out of a camera, something that I would hand over to a client. If the image is mostly dark, you're going to notice noise in the shadows for sure, even when shooting at its kind of most native and lowest ISOs and gains. To show that off, here's a test sequence I actually shot in natural light, definitely way too late in the afternoon. This is kind of just before sunset, and I was shooting at 12 decibels analog gain, and this is it before any noise reduction. So it's something to be aware of. Again, how do I reduce the noise? Well, you're going to get far less noise, keeping that gain as low as possible in camera. That obviously means super fast glass and lots of light. So there's going to be an extra resources you need to use if you want to minimize that gain. As part of my workflow, I use DaVinci Resolve's noise reduction tools. But interestingly, the best results I've got for noise reduction are with third-party plugins through something like After Effects. So Red Giant's Denoiser plugin, I don't know if they make that anymore, but I found really good results with it. Topaz Labs and the AI noise reduction, they seem to work pretty well as well. They're going to obviously continue to improve. And I even had an experiment with one of the new features, AI denoise, from something like Lightroom. And that gives you really good ways to control your image. But it's the fixed pattern noise that you really need to be out looking for. So you want to reduce that gain as much as you can in camera for best results. Let's talk about the image. Is it a good 1080p? Yes, it's incredibly sharp. I've honestly been really impressed at the quality of the image. You can increase the frame rate at the sacrifice of resolution. So there have been, I think, 2 shots, the client shots, where I've stepped down to 720p to access 1495 FPS and handed that over as a deliverable. Can it upscale? Absolutely. Most of my projects are usually 4K capture, 1080p delivery, and most of my projects don't have just slow motion in them. So I don't necessarily need a 4K image right off the bat, but it obviously needs to edit well together. As I said, you can use something like Topaz Labs to upscale to an incredibly sharp 4K in my testing. But when I then put my 4K raw footage with my 1080p raw footage, it all cuts together pretty well. 1080p is very good in this camera. The dynamic range, it's not great. It has, I think, poor highlight roll off. You get close to clipping, then you've clipped. You really have to consider reducing your dynamic range if you want to keep everything fitting within the sensor's capabilities. And so if you're using this as a specialty camera for specialty shots or specific shots as part of a sequence, you probably just need some extra consideration on how you light your shots, because when you pit this against more modern cameras, you will see a difference. I kind of view this camera as kind of like giving me an image reminiscent of when the DSLR revolution, video revolution happened, you know, the 5D Mark IIs or the 7Ds. You're only getting 7-8 stops of dynamic range, but when you light it well to those restrictions, it actually gives you a lovely imagery. The same is true for the Chronos. It can give you a very, very nice looking image. It can record into most image formats that you can think of, except a ProRes. I love that about this camera. It is kind of like its own self-contained computer, so you can save to TIFF sequences, PNG, JPEG, H.264 video, and my favorite, Cinema DNG RAW, which is awesome when you factor that into your post-production workflow. They're beefy files, obviously, but it offers you way more control over your image. So lighting is going to be super important with this camera. It's not just enough to buy this camera and be ready. You've got to consider the lighting you need to shoot what you're wanting, especially in the style that you're after. When I first started, I muddled through with like 300Ds and Fresnel lenses, a couple of 500 watt fixtures, and I just got there. But now I have my own aperture lighting, including 1200D watt fixture. So I think at a minimum, you do need to look at 500, 600 watts output from your lighting fixtures. And that may hold you back if you don't factor that into your client projects or the budget you're working with, because you might not just need a couple of 500, 600 watt lights, you might need more, because it depends on what you're lighting. You might have to light a far bigger area, and every single area in that image is going to need a light source of some kind. You will need more light than you consider, especially remembering as soon as you convert a hard point source into something that is more diffused and is going to give you a more complementary look, you're going to take a massive step down in that light's effective output. So if you want something like really big, really soft sources, you have to take a look at something like a 1200 watt LED, or dare I say, even step into HMI territory, which I've never stepped into. I don't know HDMI land. I've never gone there. I've always had the need for house pluggable LED lights. So you're definitely going to be playing into the higher end there, unless you're filming in natural light. But even on a cloudy day, you will be surprised at how fast a stop you need to shoot to be able to expose your image at 1000 frames a second, even if you start opening up that shutter speed. You're definitely more keenly aware of the inverse square law when it comes to lighting and exposure, especially when you're considering high frame rates and therefore shutter speeds. Exposure times are minimal, and suddenly a room that would have that natural fall off at 25 FPS, but can become this like black void other than the subject you're lighting. So that means more consideration and more lighting than you do think to get a more balanced and controlled scene, and again fitting within that dynamic range for the most pleasing image. This is much easier for a tabletop environment, and of course much harder for wider setups or even outside. Even on a cloudy day, you would be surprised how wide open you need your lens to be able to go if you're minimizing that gain to get exposure. Let's talk about the color you get from this camera. It doesn't really have inbuilt color profiles or the ability to load LUTs or anything like that. What you see is kind of what you get unless you're filming in something raw like Cinema DNG. You control the look of the image via a 3x3 RGB color matrix. Now, personally, as a camera operator, video producer, I've never used one to control the look of an image. That to me is very much a post-production color grading thing that I just am not knowledgeable about. So you've really got to play around if you want to get a look on the back of your screen on your monitor that you can actually trust monitoring. I just used monitor for exposure, focus, and composition really. Of course, when you're filming in Cinema DNG RAW, that doesn't really matter. You're still getting your kind of your digital negative that you can then move into your color correction and post-production workflow. So your end result, what that image looks like, will just depend on the Cinema DNG color profiles that your system has access to. I found that when I first started, when I was using Adobe Camera Raw to try and process these Cinema DNG files, I got wacky magenta skin tones, wacky looks, which you can edit out, but you're still getting almost like quite a stylized image because of it, and not what I would call a natural or kind of filmic look out of it. I've had much better results in DaVinci Resolve, if I'm honest, moving into the BMD film gammas and color grading out from there. I'm actually quite happy with the look I can get now, and I think I can get some really nice skin tones from that image. Matching to other cameras is not perfect. This is a very unique, odd camera at times, but again, thanks to the flexibility of Cinema DNG, I think I've been able to match fairly closely to the Blackmagic Pocket cinema cameras I often shoot on. Again, depending on your other camera system, that's going to vary. So you may need to have a good amount of testing done before you even consider shooting to know that you can match towards the camera that you're looking to shoot with. Would I use this on commercial work? I would, but I would not use it for broadcast. I would use it specifically for social media or online use only, which I have. Again, close to a dozen projects that have all been social media oriented. Could you use it as part of like, would your first AC know how to use this camera? Look, it's a specialty camera. You're really gonna have to understand how the menu system works. It can be buggy at times. You're going to have to keep remembering to black calibrate the sensor every time you change your settings to really, again, minimize the noise that the sensor is producing. But once you work through those hiccups and those speed humps, and you understand how to get a good image out of it, again, handing this to someone else, I know they wouldn't be able to get the same look out of the camera that I can. And that's, I think, where the real benefit has come in for me. On its own, this is probably not the best investment. This has not made my money back financially. I thought I'd get more interest from a rental item for other production companies, or maybe, getting into high speed, being a high speed technician. Hasn't worked that way. There hasn't really been a need for it. And on jobs where they do want that, they're gonna go higher end. They're gonna go for the Phantoms. So this really suits, the owner operators who are getting enough work coming through that they can continuously charge on the rental to the client for their own camera to make your money back on it. However, it really prepares you, accessing a quote unquote low budget high speed camera like this, it does prepare you for this new world of high speed video. I love that I'm now have a far better appreciation and workflow when it comes to high-speed cinematography, so that when I look at newer variants coming through the pipeline, Freefly Ember, I'm looking at you, that shoot a cleaner image with better dynamic range, possibly at better and higher resolutions in the future. I've got my foundation in place to create something that really, really stands out. Okay, so that's the Chronos 2.1 HD in a nutshell. What do you think? I'd love to know if you have any questions about the camera that I haven't covered, about the image itself, about features that I haven't gone through. Let me know with a comment below. Are you looking into high-speed video? I'd really love to know your thoughts on even any alternatives out there, experiences that you've had with high-speed video. And make sure to subscribe if you are interested, as I said before, in tabletop or product cinematography and promotion. Then I really want to focus this YouTube channel on creating content aimed at creating that kind of content. So make sure to subscribe to stay in touch. All right, thanks for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.